Let me just rip this off immediately. I'm sick, I sound terrible, but on the bright side, the state of my voice now accurately mirrors my content. Here's a quick list of things that user reviews are good for. Review bombing games that get too much praise, review bombing games that are too woke, review bombing games because they're on a console you don't own, review bombing games because another completely unrelated game is good, review bombing games with actual bad business practices, and getting mad at Video Game Donkey. Here's a list of things that user reviews are not good for. Actually reviewing games. For a long time in the video game space, I noticed people saying that they actually trusted user scores more than critic scores because they were a better reflection of if your average layman would enjoy something. Probably because these reviews don't usually follow some exact metric or concern themselves with the art, and are much more positive because it's fun, negative because it's not fun. But I guess people realized that we'd left something helpful on the internet by accident and decided that they wouldn't stand for it, because at this point, user scores have become so mutilated that you can hardly glean any useful information from them anymore. There was always some subsection of boneheads writing user reviews, and that's still the case today. For example, here's somebody who claims that the God of War series became trash once Cory Barlog took over, and I just don't have the heart to tell him that that literally happened after one game. But I'm not talking about people with bad takes, you'll never be able to get rid of those. I'm talking about people who use these review sites to make a point as part of a movement, usually without even playing the game in question. I swear I've heard news about every major release in the last 3 years being review bombed for one reason or another. Pentiment review bombed by Sony fans, Horizon Forbidden West review bombed by Xbox fans, God of War Ragnarok review bombed by Elden Ring fans, Elden Ring review bombed by God of War Ragnarok fans, Sonic Frontiers review bombed by Donkey fans or people pretending to be Donkey fans. Sometimes it's actually a push in the positive direction, but it still feels like a manipulated score the other way. Days Gone and Ghost of Tsushima famously had reviews that called out The Last of Us 2, a lot of them admitting to not having played any of the games in question as they got propped up just to bring another game down, so you're no longer actually measuring whether these are good games or not, just that some other game was bad. Other times, people will use these to call out professional critics. Deathloop, I remember, got rave reviews from major publications, so the user reviews are corrupt IGN with 10 point. Hyped up to hell by the shill game journalists. How anyone rated this game above a 5 is a paid-for review / commercial. To be clear, a lot of people didn't like this game and would give it a bad score, but they gave it an even worse score because somebody else gave it a good one. I think I mentioned this example on the channel before, but that's not reviewing the game, it's reviewing the reviews of the game, but it's still sitting there denoted as the user score of Deathloop. No matter what you think about any game I talked about here and whether they deserved or didn't deserve higher or lower scores, there's no denying that people got drunk off this feeling of protest that came from giving a lazy, hack job game one big red number that you can toss out in all your tweets. And it's basically riddled every single game with a disproportionate amount of bad faith reviews. At this point, you need to read up on the entire backstory, complete all the side quests, and watch the 2-season spin-off about each game's user score to understand why they got to the point they are, which defeats the entire purpose. You're supposed to look at this number and maybe a couple of details and understand whether people generally like this product or not. Instead, I don't think I've looked at a game's Metacritic user score for legitimate guidance in what to purchase for years. They've turned into petty war zones for people with way too much time on their hands, and honestly, I'm sick of it. We have enough places like that already. People who don't have knowledge on all the drama or don't feverishly keep up with game news, aka people who don't think about ending it all on a daily basis, have a right to get accurate opinions on the products they want to buy. But I'm not just gonna sit here and complain, okay? Let's talk about solutions. In my opinion, the first and most important change that needs to be made by Metacritic is verification. I have no idea how this isn't a thing yet. One of the reasons I still give some legitimacy to user scores on Steam specifically is that you need to have at least launched the game on Steam to leave a review. You could have refunded it, played 2 seconds, whatever, but you need to start it. At the very least, this seriously cuts down on reviews from people who are only rating the game for some ulterior motive or personal vendetta when they never had any plans to play the game in the first place. To leave a review, you need to put actual money into the product, so you have to ask yourself, will I pay $10 just to shit on this game? Will I pay $60? Probably not. Now you could buy it, review it, and then refund it, but Steam has a feature that lets you know how many hours the reviewer played, so if you toss on a hate-filled review with 0.1 hours played, your opinion probably won't be taken very seriously. And at this point, we've mainly sorted it down to people who at least had some intention of trying this game out. Prominently displaying the playtime of the reviewer is incredibly important. If somebody did fall off a 100-hour RPG at the 2-hour mark, they have a right to leave their thoughts. If the game was so boring early on that it completely turned them off from it entirely, that's valid criticism. But if you're looking for reviews that cover the full game, you can usually tell if somebody actually did that by their hour count. The element of verification completely changes how I see these reviews. This actually feels like information instead of whatever petty games are being played on Metacritic. Of course, one of the advantages that Steam has is the platform where you play the game is the same place where they house all these ratings, so you're automatically authenticated. Steam will obviously know if you purchased a game on Steam or not, but I don't feel like it'd be that hard to incorporate this for a third-party site. Metacritic Metacritic is huge. It dictates bonuses for some studios and directly affects every game company with its critics section especially. I feel like they could definitely set up a system with the big players that would allow them to make sure that people reviewing these games have actually played them. PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo, Valve, Epic, you should be able to create a Metacritic account and add those other accounts to it. And Metacritic should only allow you to write a review for a game that you've started on those platforms. Plus, most of them also track their hours, so you could toss that at the top of the review just like Steam does. OpenCritic is a site that's actually introduced moderated audience reviews. They don't have user scores, but they do have a more robust system for getting actual opinions from the audience. And they let you declare stuff like how many hours you put into the game, whether you played it solo or co-op, whether you were a fan of the series already or not. It gives a lot of potential information, and the moderation ensures that only reviews with proper grammar and actual substance have any impact, but of course, it's not actually verification. You could just lie about any of this stuff, so why don't they verify? Well, they actually answer that question themselves. For platforms like Oculus, Stadia, and Nintendo, they couldn't find ways to verify purchases, and good news, you don't have to worry about one of those anymore. But the other ones are still a problem because introducing verification for some platforms and not others would lead to inconsistent rules. At that point, you could just say, oh, I played this game on Switch, and you wouldn't have to be verified. And in the case of Nintendo Switch exclusive games versus Sony exclusive games, one would have to be verified while the other one wouldn't. One thing to note though is that OpenCritic is much newer, it's much smaller, and it doesn't have the same reputation and direct impact on the industry. I remind you again, a lot of studios base their bonuses off of what a game gets on Metacritic, so I do think there's a world out there where a bigger site like that could get accounts verified. I just don't think they want to. More steps for authentication means less people reviewing these games, and less people reviewing these games means less people visiting your site. And while OpenCritic's motto is quality over quantity, Metacritic's is, hey, homeless guy on the street, what are your opinions on Conker's Bad Fur Day? I don't think anything is really going to change unless people start putting OpenCritic over Metacritic and we see control change hands, which I hope it does. It's a much better site with a cleaner interface. Insert Will Smith Men in Black meme here. And the best Metacritic could do to protect its user reviews was put a little delay timer on them so people had time to feasibly play the game before they wrote about it, which they did back in 2020 after some game came out. I don't know, there was like a controversy or something, who knows, it probably wasn't a big deal, but that really doesn't cut down on the BS that floods this site. I also recognize that requiring verification would screw over people who played at a friend's house or used a friend's account, which is unfortunate, but it is an incredibly small fraction of most player bases, and I think it's still a preferred alternative to having a bunch of randos complain about something they've never played. There are other changes that could be made to user reviews as well. I've always thought it would be kind of cool to put the focus on specific words, mainly adjectives, that would best describe the game at hand. And that would combine the convenience of one quick look at a page giving you a general outlook on the game and the slightly more in-depth information you get with a deeper dive. You could attach a few summarizing words to your review and the site would measure which ones were used by the most people. Of course, if you just left it to the audience, I guarantee every game on the planet that was the slightest bit good would just be masterpiece, underrated, and better than sex, not that I've ever had it, and every bad game would be trash, overrated, and not The Witcher 3. But in that case, maybe there should be a limited, comprehensive list of actual descriptive words and signifiers that you could choose from. That way certain near synonyms also wouldn't be split in two. I don't know, I think it could be kind of cool, and unless the review bombs are completely overwhelming, they'd only have a tiny amount of representation on that board instead of skewing the entire value over. There's some kinks to iron out for sure, but I think it could be interesting. I also think we gotta abandon the number systems for user scores altogether. We can argue back and forth whether even critic number scores should exist, but at least the majority of them base it off of some set of rules. 99% of users just see a 0, 8, and 10 when they look at a 10-point system. 10 is great, 8 is okay, and 0 is a bad game. Recommending or not recommending might not be nearly as comprehensive, but I think we just gotta whittle these options down because the current layout is clearly not working. Again, they have this option on Steam, and I just think it works way better. But no matter what changes we end up making, I think we can all agree that user reviews as of right now have not been fulfilling their basic purpose of providing an accurate rating of the game they're summarizing. You could say it's not a big deal, but again, this is meant to be a source of information, and needing to be perpetually in the know to understand the reason why games get the reviews they do isn't ideal. Whether bad faith reviews affect the score by 5 or 0.5, there's almost always some controversy going on with them, and it can be spurred on by any group of people. Personally, I'm getting really tired of it, and I hope the big players can make more effective changes than just delaying reviews, because a lot of people are being fed tainted information as is. Anyway, subscribe, join the Discord, and go give God of War Ragnarok a 0 because I hate black people. Peace.